During the Great Depression, Oregon, like the rest of the country, was in economic chaos. 80% of lumber mills had shut down. Families were abandoning their farms and businesses. Work was scarce. Hope arrived in 1932 with presidential candidate Franklin D. Roosevelt. He promised that if elected, he'd put people to work on public works projects, like building a giant dam on the Columbia River. Roosevelt stuck to his promise. Soon after his election, construction began on Bonneville Dam, one of the biggest WPA projects to come out of the Depression.
Bonneville Dam was a relief project in putting 4,000 men to work, and a great multiplier effect on the local economy for those who were involved in servicing that labor force.
Soon the site was buzzing with activity. Trucks, barges, shovels, and crews worked 24 hours a day. The conditions were harsh, but spirits were high. Workers earned at least 50 cents an hour, more if they had a skill. The Army Corps of Engineers even hired folk singer Woody Guthrie to visit the construction site, entertaining workers and writing songs.
Roll, Columbia, won't you roll, roll, roll?
If the crew imagined themselves in a contest to harness the Columbia River, their star player was a 441-ton shovel nicknamed Mr. Monaghan. Bigger than a house, it could scoop 12 tons of rock and gravel in one bite. But what really caught visitors' attention was Mr. Monaghan could walk. Not everyone supported the dam.
There were great criticisms that there simply wasn't the market for that kind of power. More far-sighted people said there may not be the market now, but there soon will be.
Others were concerned about Bonneville's effect on wildlife, especially Columbia River salmon. Bonneville Dam rose from the riverbed, eventually standing 20 stories high and 5 football fields wide. In 1937, President Roosevelt returned to dedicate Bonneville, a triumphant public works project he had promised just 5 years before. When Bonneville's turbines began generating electricity, they produced an enormous amount of power, 3 times what the region could use. No one could have predicted that very soon the nation would need every bit of that power. From Bonneville Dam, the president motored 78 miles on rough and curving roads to dedicate another WPA project, Timberline Lodge.
Mount Hood had long been a popular site, even in the 19th century when people had to get there by horseback and foot.
As early as 1926, the Forest Service had plans to provide an overnight lodge. The Depression put those plans on hold until 1936, when money from the New Deal revived plans for a grand lodge, primarily as a way of putting people to work. From March to June, workers dug through 12 to 18 feet of snow just to put in a road to Timberline. At the site, construction workers spent weeks in camp, happy to be earning about 90 cents an hour. They dragged rocks from the slopes of Mount Hood, and stonemasons built the walls. Many of these masons had worked on the Columbia Gorge Highway. The east and west wings were built first, and then the huge wood columns were lifted into place for the magnificent central lodge. Aided by a late winter, workers had the building enclosed before heavy snows hit. Then attention turned to the inside. Portland interior decorator Marjorie Hoffman Smith was in charge of the artistic side of the project.
We had a few fine artists, but there weren't many. But we had a great many willing craftsmen.
All were grateful for the work.
Well, it's probably very hard for you today to realize what the Depression meant, because people were so desperate. As you know, they jumped out of windows and they sold apples on streets. So in these projects of ours, we were giving people a living wage and a sense of security.
There was one last-minute detail. The simple chairs at the lodge had no arms. Because of his disability, the president needed an armchair. Working through the weekend, the craftsman got it done just in time.
Here to Mount Hood will come thousands and thousands of visitors in the coming years.
During the Depression, few people actually came, and the lodge stood empty during World War II. Reopened after the war, but failed to attract enough paying customers. In 1955, Richard Constam reopened Timberline, this time for good. It took him 10 years to make the lodge a profitable business, but today, Timberline Lodge is a huge tourist attraction. More than 250,000 people visit each year. Timberline Lodge was built to put people back to work during the Depression. It's hard to believe today, but from start to finish, the project was completed in 18 months. The total cost, less than $1 million. The workers earned their pay and more, leaving us today with a still stunning lodge in a magnificent setting.